Sandy, thanks so much. Let me ask you why you decided to take the time to sit down and put these words on paper.
Great question. So, I've been a blogger with Huffington Post for a little while now, so I do tend to write for them, and so I do have that platform. And obviously, I'm going through my own mourning period right now, and I had something to say. I needed to get something off my chest to sort of walk myself through this grief that I'm going through. And I realized as I was writing it that it could probably help a lot of other people too. To publish it publicly.
hmm Yeah, and it's one of those things I found when I was reading it that you almost don't think about when it comes to our pets. When one of our pets dies, it's almost, as I was reading it, I was realizing that there is like a grieving process through this as well, right? With our pets, and it's almost something that you don't realize until you read a piece like yours, or until you have a chat with somebody about how they felt through a time like that. Would you agree with that? That we don't really think about it until we see somebody put words down on paper, or until we talk to someone about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I sort of touched on that in the piece, in that we have really great customs and norms around how to grieve for human beings. Our religious ceremonies, our funeral processions, along those lines. But we don't really have anything in place that's sort of socially acceptable for our pets. And yet our pets, anyone who's a pet owner knows this, our pets are family members just as any other, anybody else in the family is. They are really important parts of our lives, and of course we're going to grieve them.
So do you think that people, what do you think people need to do then? How should people approach, that grieving process when it comes to a pet in the family, when a pet dies? What do you think people should do, and how should they kind of approach that?
Honestly, like any other death. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm honoring the relationship that I had with my happy, just as I would, a human loved one. So I'm feeling the pain of grief. I'm a mindfulness trainer as well. So I teach mindfulness. I practice mindfulness daily. So, and in fact, if you read the piece, even during his passing, I was practicing it mindfully. I was in the moment. I was in the here and now, experiencing everything in the moment, in the here and now. And, recognizing that there are some moments where it's unbearable, and that's part of grieving. It's part of loving someone. And also realizing that there are other days that are going to be a little bit easier. Today's a little bit easier than yesterday was for me. Definitely, right. A lot easier than Monday was, when it was the 2-week anniversary of his passing.
Right.
So really just sort of giving myself permission, giving ourselves permission to be with our reactions and our feelings, and understanding that all of this is normal. It's a normal sort of natural response to the loss of a significant relationship.
And can you expand a little bit on the mindfulness part? What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so the way I define mindfulness is essentially sort of being in the here and now, in all of its glory and difficulty. So actually, rather than sort of getting lost in our thoughts, like how many times have you driven from point A to B, and 20 minutes later you've gotten to your destination? Your body was in that car driving, but where was your mind?
Yeah, you don't remember any of it.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're losing out a lot on our lives by just sort of not being in the here and now. And there's a lot of healing that can come from being grounded in the here and now.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, especially with the driving example. I do that every day, probably.
Yeah, well, so do I.
Yeah.
I practice mindfulness myself every day, and yet I'm a driver too, and a lot of times I'm not in the here and now, and so we're sort of losing a lot of our lives in that way, rather than actually. There's a lot to be seen when we're driving. There's a lot of beauty that we're missing. I mean, we can look at all the colors in nature, or along the route that we're passing by. We can, look at the beautiful sky. We can look at, there's a lot to see that we're missing out on.
Yeah. Do you think it's okay for people to feel the loss of a pet as much as someone might feel the loss of a loved one in the family. And the reason why I asked that question is because I think a lot of people, because I agree with you. I think you're right when you say that our pets are part of our family, and we get a pet maybe from 8 weeks old, and then we have them through 12, 13, 14, or what have you.
Yeah, way
And
too short.
right, well, it is way too short, exactly. But you establish a relationship with these animals and these pets, and they become part of the family, and then they die, and then I think it's natural to grieve and feel for the loss. But I think what happens is a lot of people still tell themselves, well, it's a pet. Why am I feeling like this? I shouldn't be feeling like this. And I think that's wrong. So my question is it okay for people to just kind of say, you know what, I'm just going to grieve like I would for anyone else because they were part of my life for 15 years?
I absolutely am a huge proponent of people to grieve for that relationship. It's a significant relationship. That animal showed us unconditional love. That was a beautiful, pure love that you experienced from somebody.
Right.
And of course you're going to miss it. And the way I look at it is love is love, loss is loss, grief is grief. No matter if we're mourning a human or an animal, the love that's no longer there is there's a void. And of course we're going to miss that. Of course we're going to grieve that. And I think one of the things that this blog that I wrote highlights is that it's important for us all, pet people and not non-pet people too. It's important for us all to sort of find common ground with each other and understanding that love is love, loss is loss, and grief is grief. And rather than sort of having said that, every loss reaction is different. I've lost humans where some losses are more painful than others. This loss of an animal is evoking a different reaction within me, obviously. But I guess the point of my blog is let's not judge each other's reactions, and instead let's simply sort of be there for one another and empathize instead.
I like that message. Again, I really like it because I think what happens a lot of the times is that there may be a little bit of a stigma between someone. I was reading a different piece, Sandy, just before I let you go, about somebody they had written an opinion piece, or maybe it would have been a blog as well about, hey, I lost my dog. Why can't I take time off work? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's common knowledge that if you lose someone in the family, you go to your boss and you say,
Yeah.
my grandma passed away, and then your boss says, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Take all the time you need. But would people really feel comfortable doing that with a dog? If you went to your boss and said, I lost my dog yesterday, sure, your boss might say, yeah, take a day or whatever, but it wouldn't be that same level of understanding. And that got me thinking as well. You know what? It should be. It should be, right?
Absolutely. It should. Look, I touch on that in the blog as well. And, speaking from my experience, his passing, Happy passed on June 27th. And I work in private practice, so I'm sort of my own boss. But I canceled. That was a Monday evening that he passed. I canceled my appointments, all of my appointments for that week. I was not able to function. I was way too numb, crying all the time. There was no way I would be able to heal others as a counselor that week when my head just wasn't in that space. So I had to do that. I had to take that time off. And you're right. It's, other people who work for companies. And like I said, I touch on that in the blog. We don't have bereavement leave for dogs or for pets in most benefit packages kind of thing.
Right.
So that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because again, grief is grief.
And
grief doesn't discriminate whether the deceased was human or animal.
That's right. Yeah. And my fiance is a veterinarian, and she deals with families every day that are going through this, and she comes home sometimes, and we've had this conversation. She said, I don't, she said, I had the craziest day. Somebody came home and had to put their dog down, or came to my office, had to put the dog down, but they're telling me that they have to be at work the next day, and her heart breaks for that, right? Because they're grieving.
Yeah.
So,
and by the way, hats off to your wife and to all vets. I don't know how they do the work that they do, but they are superheroes in my book. I loved my vet. I thought she did a I just, yeah,
Yeah. No.
it was really touching actually to see her break down in tears.
Sure.
As well. Yeah, so my hat's off to all vets out
Well. Listen, Sandy. I think I think it's a very good piece. We'll
Thank
pass
you.
people along to it. I think people should have a read and just get people thinking. So thanks very much for your time as well. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Eric. It's great to be here.